Now, when you first thought this, I thought it was, yeah, it does fit with observations,
Mhm.
but you can have many theories that fit with observations that aren't
Mhm.
necessarily accurate.
Mhm.
But then this happens, because this is something that comes yesterday,
Yeah.
that Christine McCarthy, the CFO, is now one of the rumored contenders to replace Iger after his 2-year tenure is up.
Not even room, not even one. She's the top contender, as this headline shows. She's the person they're planning to. She's the number one on their list.
And that is weird, because this is
Mhm.
in no way, shape, or form a natural career trajectory for a CFO. CFOs don't become CEOs. Maybe for like tiny startup companies where like one person fills both roles, that's a different matter. But for a huge corporation like Disney, the CFO just doesn't become a CEO. This is unheard of. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Kamran, now, with that setup, what do you think is going on here? And have you heard anything since yesterday?
Well, number one, I have not heard anything since yesterday, but I have a feeling we're going to hear a lot more very shortly on this because if you're noticing, every one of the data points that comes out and that keeps supporting my theory of the FTX cover up happens every few days. It's only been 2 weeks, and it feels like it's been 20 years of this, right? And there will be more stuff because they're scrambling. Their behavior is extremely panicked, and as everyone likes to now do that wonderful quote from Game of Thrones, power, not Game of Thrones, from Andor. I'm sorry, from Andor. Power does not panic, and we're witnessing that live here. So when this came out, I laughed. When this announcement came out on the trade yesterday, I laughed. I said, in my opinion, my theory was confirmed at exactly this moment because I've seen people make all kinds of complicated stories as to why the CFO had to go to the board in an emergency meeting and remove Bob Chapek, all kinds of stories that don't quite make sense and don't add up to all the data points, right? They never cover all the things. And because you always say, well, what about this? Like, well, I have to think that out. And because nothing actually covers it except this kind of scandal. And so when this came out that it's been leaked to the trades that she's the number one contender for Bob Iger's job 2 years from now, and they put that out 2 weeks and a couple of days after Bob Chapek has been removed by the same woman. I said, okay,
Yeah,
my theory is
Chapek's
confirmed.
corpse hasn't even gotten cold yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my theory. I said to myself, my theory is confirmed because this isn't not just in general corporate world. This isn't the normal trajectory, as our friend Mexican Iron Man said to the members yesterday. This isn't the normal trajectory. CFOs don't generally have the skills necessary to be CEO, which is a different skill set, which requires managing in a whole different way, not just looking at numbers. This doesn't happen in Hollywood. People were shocked when Bob Chapek, who was considered a numbers guy, was brought in to replace Bob Iger. And he wasn't just a number. He wasn't an accountant. He was a manager. He had managed the parks and managed those divisions. So he had managerial experience on his resume, right? And so, but even that was shocking to people in Hollywood, is that he wasn't a slick Hollywood guy. He had no relationships with the Hollywood, with the Hollywood power players, with the actors and directors and all that. And that's what Iger was very good at, Mr. Schmoozer, right? And so, but at least as a manager of the parks, he had a management ability that you think, okay, maybe he can run a company. This woman has none of that. She can manage a team of accountants and make sure that they, in theory, follow general accounting procedures, which I'm suggesting they're not doing. But this makes no sense in Hollywood. Christine McCarthy, no one's heard of her outside of the accounting group, in the industry. No one's heard of her until she started making all these moves. And now she's like, you see her name every day in the Wall Street Journal. You see her name in the trades now. This is not normal for an accountant. As we all joke in Hollywood, the accountants are a lot like the dwarves in the mountain doing the stuff right behind the scenes. You don't see them. And so suddenly she's like the superstar. It doesn't make any sense. It's not normal in the history of Hollywood. It doesn't make any sense when people freaked out about Chapek being a numbers guy, but here's a numbers woman with no managerial experience as a CEO of one of the largest companies on the planet as being positioned for that. So that doesn't make sense. So my theory feels like it's been confirmed because if I am correct that there is a financial scandal, specifically an FTX scandal that Ms. McCarthy embroiled them in, probably under the encouragement of people like Mr. Iger, say, we've got some financial problems, cash flow problems. Put some money put some of the company's cash in this FTX thing. It'll do two things. One, there'll be a quick lottery win. That everyone was thinking, quick lottery win. It's going to shoot up. We'll cash out. We'll cover any holes we've got on the books, right? And in the process, my friends in the Democratic Party will also, get a nice little kickback, right? Which we understand has been happening with FTX. So, Mr. Iger being, very proud Democrat and openly planning to be the nominee one day for the president under the Democratic Party. So that makes sense that he and others like BlackRock and Vanguard who've been pushing FTX would have told her, and they're major investors in Disney, would told her, hey, just do this. It's a quick scheme. We'll cover it up, no problem. It's all going to work out fine. And it didn't, because FTX went to zero, which, in my opinion, probably impacted some major elements like cash flow, right? And that's why she rushes when she gets the report from the accountants on Friday. What's the damage? Like on Wednesday, we know FTX implodes, and Thursday she tells her accountants, tell me what the damage is. Her team gets the damage report. She's horrified on Friday, and she realized that damage report is going to end up on Chapek's desk. And if I'm correct, that Chapek didn't know that this was being done, or the extent of what was being done, it was going to end up on his desk on Monday. She had to get rid of him before Monday, which is what happened, right? On Friday, she's calling the board desperately. They're having a private secret meeting on Saturday, and then and firing him on Sunday without him even having a chance to respond, because they couldn't let that report hit his desk on Monday. They had to have Bob Iger, who I'm positing was behind the scheme, come in, and he's got the report. He already know what he did, right? So now they've got this internal stuff. What happens in 2 years from now, because Bob Iger was given an emergency 2-year contract, come in and fix this, whatever this is, right? And so what happens in 2 years? They get somebody else who wasn't part of this scheme, comes in through the normal processes of how an heir is brought into a company like Disney, right? And that person, because I'm suggesting this is tight-knit amongst the board and some very powerful high-level people. Not every executive knows about it. Someone like a Peter Rice probably would not have known about it. That's one of the reasons people were surprised that, okay, now Iger's back. Why isn't Peter Rice, who Chapek fired, brought back immediately? He has the power to do that. There's nothing he fired Kareem Daniel the next day, who was Chapek's appointed successor. Why wouldn't he bring back Peter Rice, who everyone thought was Iger's appointed successor? Because Peter Rice probably wasn't in on the scheme, right? And so they can't have him come in because, they don't know. Will Rice go and say, hey, what's this crap? I don't want to go to jail. What is this crap on the books? I'm going to tell somebody. I'm going to tell the SEC. They can't have him do it. And so what do? The only person they can have as the next CEO is someone involved in the scheme. And as I'm suggesting, the person who was the spear point of the scheme is Ms. McCarthy, who doesn't have the skills to be CEO, but she's the one who knows where all the bodies are buried. She has to be in there because nobody else can be allowed to look at those books, or they all go to jail. Their lives are over. So that's the only thing that explains this, which doesn't make any sense, on top of the other 5 things that don't make any sense in the last 10 days. So the reality is, for me, I'm absolutely convinced this move confirmed that there's a financial crisis, and the timing confirms for me it's FTX. And the fact that Bob Chapek hasn't said one word in defense, even though he's being pilloried in the press, right, and blamed for all kinds of stuff that makes no sense, like he's cooking the books. And as Mexican Iron Man said, he doesn't even have the ability to log into the books as a CEO. He doesn't have that power. Why is he taking this? Because if it's FTX related, people are dying in helicopter accidents in the last 10 days. He's got to keep his mouth. Yes, he was given NDA. Here's $40 million
and stuff. You said,
yeah. I mean, that's what's happening the last 3 days. People are dying mysteriously involved in FTX. Take your money, shut up. You don't even need the NDA. You don't want this outcome for yourself and your family, right? So he's been absolutely silent. He will take the hit on his reputation in order to stay alive. And that's my absolute opinion now. It's been cemented by this action.
Yeah. So. And I just want to also add in, Chapek was fired on a Sunday.
Which
evening,
never happens,
during the Elton John concert. This has never, ever happened, that someone is summarily fired on a Sunday off hours in the evening.
Yeah.
I mean, normally you'd wait until Monday morning for that.
Especially in the middle of some event like that. But yeah, we're joined by
hold on
as well.
Do you have empirical data as to how many people have been fired during Elton John concert? Okay,
one.
You need to cover the base.
2.
I'm sorry. I'm here.
Well, we have a data point of 1.
Actually,
so
Paul,
far.
You're right. Elton's probably fired quite a few people over the years. The bitch is back usually. So.
I'm here to bring in the useful info.
Yeah, that could very well be.
Those are I'm glad we're joined by Mikey because he's our money man. So I mean, I'm curious to hear his take on Kamran's theory, I guess we'll call it for now at this point. But it's seemingly there's some water to it, I guess we'll say.
Where there is smoke, there is fire. And let's look at the smoke. Let's start with what Andres just said. He was fired on the weekend on a Sunday. This is a CFO
in the evening.
In the evening,
not Sunday daytime, but Sunday evening.
Right. Basically, there was for whatever reasons, which will eventually emerge. To me, there's three or four data points that are important. Number one is the fact that he was taken out on a Sunday night unexpectedly. That means that trigger had to be pulled before whatever might have happened on Monday, and that's where that Cameron's alluding that there might have been a report coming out the following week, and she could not. She and whoever is with her on this thing could not allow a business day to surface. If Monday had been a holiday, they probably would have done it on Monday afternoon or Monday night as they were scrambling. But the time for scrambling had to come to a close, and that's why this happened on Sunday. Number two is going back to what was said earlier. CFOs never become CEOs. It just doesn't happen. The bigger the company, the less likely it is to happen. It's a completely different skill set. Number three, as soon as I heard this BS story of Chapek was trying to do things with the numbers, I laughed out loud. Because as someone who is, I got my career started working for ExxonMobil, working in the Miami accounting office. My first tax return was a Costa Rican oil refinery facility, a chemical refinery facility, and my first tax return was $265 million. And I know the shenanigans that we were doing at Exxon in order to try to create earnings based upon temperature reads and stuff like that. I won't bore you with the details, but what I can tell you is this, is that the CEO does not even have access to the system in order to do journal entries to change anything in the books. And if for whatever reason he orders that to happen, that's what's called an exception in terms of delegation of accountability and controls within the accounting system. And it's instantly an SEC reportable item. And it's instantly a disclosure item, and the internal legal counsel gets involved very quickly. There's no way that Chapek did anything to hide anything. I think that he was taken out because the shit's going to hit the fan, and the only people that can reliably cover up whatever the shit is that's going to hit the fan is the CEO and the CFO. And I remind everyone else that when you look back on corporate America scandals over the last several decades, it has always been an outgoing or an outwardly focused strategic CEO paired up with a nefarious CFO. That happened at MCI WorldCom, that happened in Enron, and it's happened over and over and over again. Where and I really think that Bob was brought back to lay cover for whatever's going on. Now, if she thinks that she's going to rise to become CEO, she's got another thing coming, because she does not have the skill set to deal with this. And I understand why she thinks she does. I thought a lot about this since yesterday's live stream, member stream. By the way, become a member of Midnight Edge After Dark, and all of our affiliated channels and Patreons. I thought about this a lot, and what stuck out for me is the fact that she's been on all of these quarterly calls, doing these financial calls with all these investors, and her head is probably a little bit overenlarged. She's probably panicked about something that's in the books, that she knows where the skeletons are in which closet. She knows where the bodies are buried, and she's got an overenhanced sense of self because she has been on Bob Iger and Bob Chapek conference calls every quarter dealing with institutional investors, and her head is probably so inflated, she actually thinks that she can fix this, hide this, get beyond this, and run this company. And I think she's in for a rude awakening.
I just want to add to something Mike just said there. If I just want to add to Mike what said there, because I've not had a single person at Disney confirm to me, Cameron, this is what happened, right? I have, however, had Disney employees on my Patreon say to me, wow, thanks you. I hadn't thought about this. This feels like it's what happened, right? So I have that. They see, but one of the Disney members of my Patreon sent me this message yesterday when this came out. He sent it attached with this article about her becoming a CFO. He said, this woman has been, he was saying, this woman is behind all this stuff in the sense of the PR stuff. Like, all you see is her name all over the Wall Street Journal, and he's like, I think she leaked this to Deadline herself. So he's of the opinion that she's pushing herself to be the CEO, which fits in with what Mike is saying, that the board may be positioning her to cover up, but she should be keeping her head low. There may be very much a feeling of this, she suddenly got a moment of stardom, which, Mike, a lot of the guys sitting in the back rooms, they hunger for that stardom. And now she's like the star in the financial world. The Wall Street Journal's quoting her. She may be the one herself putting it out there unwisely that she's positioned for CEO because she, her ego's getting to her. She's becoming a star. That's not going to work out for her.
One of the things that I saw when I first saw that was that Iger was never intended to be the person to take over from Disney. It was always her. He is what I'm calling the David Tennant of Doctor Who, where they didn't want the gay black actor with the trans companion to come right in after the bag lady. They needed David Tennant there as a brief buffer, and that's what Iger is. As soon as I saw that, I went, she's always been the one jonesing for Chapek's role. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I remain of the belief that there is a crisis here, and she's the spear point of it. But I actually think there is an ego there. There's a pathology. The smart thing to do would be, if you are doing this and you're doing a cover up, keep your head low. Keep your head low. Do not be putting your name out in the Wall Street Journal that you're the one behind removing him. She's being called the King Killer. She's being compared to Jamie, what's his face from Game of Thrones. I mean, that's insane. Mike, is this normal behavior for an accountant to be putting themselves out like this? I don't think it is.
Absolutely not. That's why I think she's got an overinflated sense of self. And by the way, someone made a comment in the chat about this never happens. Yeah, sometimes CFOs do become CEOs, but can we be real? A company like Open Door doesn't count at trading at $1.35 a share with a market cap of $859 million. Give me a break. That's their paper and office supplies budget over at Disney.
Well, now let's say. Oh, go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, look, that's what I was saying too. That of course it does happen in startups, in minor companies, where you have like the person who was the driving soul of the company the whole time, who may say, for instance, you have like two different people who may switch roles. Like it happens, that happens, but not in huge corporations like this. Transitioning from CFO to CEO, once you get into companies over a certain level of budget, profitability, money, shareholders, it's unheard of. It doesn't happen. And also, I just want to say one quick thing before we move on. In terms of replacing Chapek and replacing Iger, just think back to when Iger took over Disney in the first place. That was a long, drawn-out battle for succession before he eventually came out on top. It was like, at least a 6-month process. When Chapek took over, there had been something of a process behind the scenes, and then Chapek was the one, we only heard about it when it was over, but obviously there had been some kind of process there. But here, it's not even a week and a half since Chapek was ousted until this woman here stands up as like the real contender, because Chato, I agree with you completely. This does have like this David Tennant feel to it. Like, okay, we have a familiar face to calm the waters, to win the industry back over, and then we're going to go with who we're going to go with the whole time here. I agree with that. I do not see that there has been any kind of like proper campaign to find the best possible manager for the company, because I assure you, a CFO is not the best possible person for the company. And on the topic of these different powerful women, we have a question here from Ardan Blade. Kamran wonders for $4. Sorry, Ardan wonders for $4.99. Kamran, could Susan Arnold have let Chapek get fired to protect him from the scandal?
So, who is Susan Arnold first before we answer this?
Yeah. She's a chairman. She's the chair of the board, and I have posited for some time that she's the Palpatine behind the rise of Chapek, because his appointment to CEO, even when Iger came back in to overshadow him, made no sense to the industry. It still doesn't quite make sense to a lot of people. But I've suggested, because she was the only person that wasn't appointed by Iger to the board, that her loyalty was at least to the company, and she wanted somebody. She saw what Iger did over that decade of ruining the company. She wanted to put her protege in, who at least was a numbers guy and a manager in there. That's been my position, and so I've long sensed that she's been his protector, and yet at the same time, he's out on a Sunday evening with Elton John, right? And I don't know. I don't know that it was never announced whether the vote to remove him by the board was unanimous. I don't think it was, because they would have said it was unanimous. I
think it was just
when they voted to affirm. Majority, thank you. When they voted to affirm him 3 months ago and let him fire Peter Rice and then give him a 3-year extension on his contract, that was stated to be unanimous. So she had engineered that unanimity. She clearly didn't engineer the unanimity here. So my feeling is that she may just have been outvoted. But at the same time, look at if I'm right, then this is the best thing that could happen to Chapek. He's been saved by the divine, like God has intervened, because his hands are clean of this garbage. Imagine he had come back in on Monday and seen this stuff and been told by the board, well, you have to cover it up. Well, he'd be pulled into it, right? But he's been removed because they don't trust him to do that. And so with time, if I'm correct, this will come out and history will remember Chapek as this innocent bystander of the scheme, right? He'll be seen in the same way some of the people in Watergate, like John Dean were, right? Who are like, I don't want to do this, right? And so that's how he's going to be perceived. So in the end, I think Chapek will have the last laugh, and Susan Arnold is as much of a strategician to realize if Kamran Pasha can figure out this thing's gonna not be cover-upable, she's figured it out a lot faster than I did, right? And she figured out in that room that these idiots are gonna blow themselves. So, fine, let my guy go. It'll be better for him in the long run. I'm sure she understood that. If I can understand that, she has more information than I do.
For all we know, she might even have been involved with. Let's just assume again. We don't know this. This is just speculation. But let's just speculate that if there was some kind of FTX thing, she comes from Wall Street, she does the finance stuff as well. She could be in on it. She could also be of the opinion that, well, fuck, we have no choice now.
I want to throw one more thing out that I found fascinating. I researched this last week, that when we're talking about the board of directors, these are essentially the 12 people that we're talking about. If we take out Iger, we've got 11 people that are on this. And what I found most fascinating is if we just run down the list, we've basically got people that are on the board in the last, like Amy Chang appointed in 21, Safra Katz 18th, that's 3 or 4 years. All of these people are recent additions to the board.
Well,
which means usually that they're very impressionable.
And speaking of Susan Arnold, I think Kamran and the question could be pointed, like, if there's two things here. If she either cares about him personally, or she sees it as a possibility that wherever this guy lands, he could maybe get me a role too. It's very possible that she looked out for him in this situation. But my thing I was going to ask you guys before going back to McCarthy, maybe she's never going to necessarily be a true CEO. What if this is just them setting the company up for a split and a sale to Apple, and she is just going to be the go-between? Does that seem like a plausibility?
Yeah,
like that's what I was going to ask you guys. But we also have Chris joining us now.
Oh, wonderful.
Where we're going to segue from this into Avatar. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Oh, thanks. But you should finish your discussion. I think.
Yeah, if Cameron can answer that real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if the board of directors, if you turned it into a chess set, who's the queen, who's the king, who's the rook, who's the knight, who are the pawns? I think the pawns are the newer board members. Anyways, just I was listening to your discussion. So,
but yeah, that's my question: is do you think that she may be positing, or maybe they may be setting her up as more so not so much a CEO position, but as somebody who's they'll have Apple take over the entertainment side of Disney, and then they'll have the parks and the properties on another side, and she'll just be basically the bridge between the two. Do you see that as a plausibility?
I mean, I definitely think everyone should give insight on this, especially Mexican Iron Man. But I think that's absolutely plausible. It still fits in my theory, which is one of the legs of my theory is that they have, whatever the crisis is, FTX or otherwise, they have to cover the whole somehow. And that's why early on in my theory, they're going to have to sell something at least to Apple. And then within 24 hours, we heard at least they were supposedly having conversations with Apple, which Iger did not quite deny. He said, it's all speculation. And I'm not having conversations with them.
That's not a no.
Yeah, that's not a no. It's an intentional wording, right? So I think Tom, you're onto something, because that is, I think, the trajectory they have to cover their asses, and who's the best person to facilitate. How do I make a sale while making sure we can cover these books? And that's McCarthy.
And I don't have any insight specifically into Disney, but I have worked for Fortune 100 companies, and a couple of them in dire panic. And the one thing that you need to understand is that companies in trouble don't feel panicked up until that the edge. They always feel there's an out. They always feel there's in control. None of the C-level people will ever reduce their salaries to help save the company. In fact, they'll give themselves raises. In the two companies I was intimately involved with, it was shocking how they just couldn't read the tea leaves on their own walls. They just thought, oh, okay, something's gonna happen, some savior is gonna happen, this will all work out. So I don't, I don't doubt and don't overestimate Disney's inability to see their own problem.
I think, Tom, you're onto something. I agree with everything that Chato said. It astounded me when I was close to a couple companies, the way they behaved when they were in big trouble. I think, Paul, you are 100% on point. I'm going to go back to what Tom said. If that might be what's happening. If I were in the situation where there's a black hole in the books, I would sell off the entertainment assets, do it in a deal where I structured back that I could retain some ongoing revenue from licensing, grab that cash, pay down the debt, cover the black hole that I am, and then go back to being a cash generating company with parks, with real estate, with lodging, cruise ships experiences, and then run those licensing fees and hold on to the TV ad revenue. That's what I would do to this company. If I were on the inside in the know and I had the ability to pull those strings and I had to cover up a scandal, that's what I would do. Not that I would be in a situation where I would have a scandal to cover up.
Because you would have stopped it. You were a man of integrity. You would have not let this get to where it got to. But this is the point.
You just admitted culpability, Mike.
I didn't hear that. You're out the other. No.
I'm on YouTube for a friend today.
But and then we should move to Chris. But that's the last thing I would say is, again, everything not only fits the theory that I'm positing, but it also fits what we know, that there is an accounting scandal that we know publicly, because they've had, under Iger's regime, we had one of McCarthy's employees, one of the accountants, said there is a scheme here to hide $3 billion of losses, right? And she went and told the company, I found something in the books that's a black hole to the extent of $3 billion. They fired her immediately, and she then went to the SEC and sued Disney for wrongful termination. 1 month ago, they settled with her. And so they basically said, okay, yeah, here's a lot of money, go away, right? Because she obviously has something on them and she accepted the settlement. So we're not going to get her thing in. But if one whistleblower knew that there was a $3 billion hole in 2017, which is when Iger was CEO, then imagine what things have gotten to in the last couple of years when they've been in a financial crisis with the lockdowns and everything else. Imagine the shenanigans they had to do to keep the company having cash flow, or at least looking like it had money on the books to survive the last couple of years. And 2017 is when there was a $3 billion scandal. Imagine how big the hole is now. And someone like Mike would have been the whistleblower that says, no, we have to stop this. And that's the last one.
Which is hilarious, because in, 2018 or 2019, they had the biggest year ever Disney did for movies. They made the most money ever for a studio, or whatever it was.
And that's when they have a black hole, right? Even then, they're resorting.
Even then, it wasn't enough. But